What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my way too early top 12 running back rankings for the 2025 fantasy football season. I know most of you have probably just wrapped up your leagues a couple of weeks ago, but I just thought this would be a fun exercise. Dive into the running backs, look forward. Obviously, a rough draft. These are going to be subject to change, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Which guys would you have higher or lower? I do think the running back position was a lot tougher than the wide receivers. I think there were a lot of dudes kind of clumped together in these top 12 where you could go in a lot of different directions. But let me know your thoughts, and let's just dive right into it here. I don't think there's going to be a ton of controversy with my running back one. I'm going with Saquon Barkley. Admittedly, I was too low on him and another guy who I'll talk about, Derrick Henry, coming into this season. He was the running back one in points per game at 22.2 PPR points. He rushed for over 2,000 yards on 5.8 yards per carry, almost had 350 attempts, and was insanely efficient at 5.8. He also scored 15 touchdowns in 16 games. My kind of biggest concern for Saquon was the lack of receiving usage and then also getting vultured on the goal line. He really wasn't overly involved as a pass catcher, and he did get vultured on the goal line, and it straight up didn't matter. The volume on the ground was there, and still 15 touchdowns in 16 games. That was with him getting tackled at the 1 or 2 yard line. This was reported on November 19th. He was tackled on the 1 or 2 yard line 11 times at that point in the season. Could have added a few more over the last few weeks. So it's not like he got lucky and there weren't a ton of tush-push opportunities. They were still racking up the rushing touchdowns with Jalen Hurts, and Saquon still got his. There's a chance he even hits higher in the touchdown department next year. So he is my running back one. Now moving into tier 2, my running back 2 is going to be Bijan Robinson. And kind of an underwhelming year 1. I feel like people were a little bit low on him, but he really lived up to the hype here in year 2. Was the running back 3 in points per game at 20.1 points per game. He was top 5 at the running back position in carries, targets, rushing yards, receiving yards, receptions, and target share. So just super well-rounded production. And we also saw him really hit in the touchdown department towards the end of the season. In his first 14 games, that was with Kirk Cousins, he had 8 total touchdowns. In his 3 games with Michael Penix, he got into the end zone 6 total times. So 3 games with Penix, 2 touchdowns in each of them. Now, I don't think he's going to go out next year and score 34 touchdowns or anything like that, but I do think Penix just kind of raised the ceiling of this offense. Maybe the receiving volume wasn't crazy with Penix there, but I think it's going to be a net positive for him moving forward. Offense is going to be better, more scoring opportunities for Bijan. Also in tier 2, I have Jahmyr Gibbs as my running back 3, and he's a very interesting player to rank because if you just look at him over the last 3 weeks, right, he's had 3 games without David Montgomery, and he has put up 25.4, 26.3, and then 46 PPR points. So operating as the workhorse, he would be the clear-cut, set-it-and-forget-it running back 1. If Montgomery was on a different roster, Jahmyr Gibbs would be my 101. The thing is, Montgomery is going to be back next year. They extended him, and Monty being back and healthy is going to cap his ceiling, but he is still going to be insanely efficient. Even this year, he was 11th in carries, but was 5th in rushing yards, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. He was 7th in targets, but 3rd in receiving yards, 2nd in yards per reception, was still getting his in terms of the touchdowns, actually led the NFL in touchdowns. And even though he has hit in that department over the last few weeks, coming off a 4-touchdown game, he was still getting into the end zone, at a pretty solid rate. So Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe he doesn't have that nuclear upside if Montgomery's healthy, but he's still going to be someone who can produce in that 20-point per game area. Plus, we all know he has that added in handcuff upside. And the fact that he's not just getting force-fed, I think also makes him a more durable option, which, makes him a slightly less risky pick. And then my last running back here in tier 2 is going to be Achane. If I was in on one player heading into 2024, it was Achane. I know a lot of people had concerns about his usage. They thought he was injury prone, he was too small, and I think he kind of went out and silenced a lot of those doubts. Had kind of a unique season because coming into the year, it was he was so amazing on the ground as a rookie. His efficiency was amazing. He was ripping off these big plays, and we saw his efficiency drop pretty significantly. He went from 7.8 yards per carry to 4.5. Now, obviously, it's unrealistic to expect him to, average over 7 yards per carry every year, but dropping below 5 was a pretty significant dip. Also, the advanced metrics, in 2023, he was 1st in rushing yards over expected per attempt. He actually fell to 7th worst. So not only was the yard per carry down, but he was actually kind of inefficient when you look at the advanced numbers, but he turned into an absolute monster as a pass catcher. He had 87 targets, caught 78 of them, and then turned that into 592 receiving yards. So he was pretty much operating as like a top 2 or 3 target on this Dolphins passing attack. And then when you actually separate the games where he played with Tua, right? So Tua missed 6 games. In the 11 games with Tua, Achane averaged 22.6 PPR points per game. So if Tua was healthy for the entire season, I mean, we'd be talking about Achane as like a full-on league winner. It's just unfortunate because he had those 4 games when Tua was on IR. The production was just not there. He had a big final game in week 18, but week 17 with no Tua, another kind of dud performance. I think he's a super unique player heading into next year because we just don't know what the usage is going to look like. Obviously, there were real question marks heading into this year. His usage wasn't exactly what I thought. Like, I didn't expect him to have this much receiving usage. I thought he could see a bump, but I thought he was going to get carried more by the big plays, the efficiency on the ground. So now looking at 2025, are they going to bring in some extra competition? Even as someone who rostered him and was high on him, I was kind of surprised with how much they were using him on the ground. It did kind of cool off towards the end of the season, but I just think he's in an interesting spot. Are we going to see an efficiency bounce back? Is he going to have a similar receiving role? If Tyreek Hill is gone, is that going to, lock in that receiving usage? A lot up in the air at this point, like I've said, but Achane, I've just kind of accepted he's a unique player. He's kind of a unicorn, and he's someone who I want to invest in for fantasy. And I do think he's going to have a couple of these like Alvin Kamara seasons where he just goes completely nuclear. Now, moving into tier 3, my running back 5 is going to be Derrick Henry. And I think I might end up dropping Henry throughout the offseason. Some people might think this ranking is too low. I've kind of been historically low on Derrick Henry every year, right? It's like he's handled so much work. Eventually, he's going to fall off. He's going to get hurt. And it just hasn't happened. Once again, logging a strong season, 19.8 points per game was the running back 4. He rushed for over 1,900 yards on 5.9 yards per carry. He was second in carries, rushing yards, and touchdowns. So we'll see how I feel about Derrick Henry. I will say, I think he's going to get pretty consistently drafted in the first round. If he's going in the first round, I'm probably not going to pay up. I imagine looking at like just these initial rankings here, I'd be willing to take those top 4 running backs in round 1, but I think the rest of round 1 is going to be very wide receiver heavy. Like if you're going to make me choose between a Brian Thomas Jr., like heading into year 2, a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown towards like the back end of the first, I'm probably going to opt for those wide receivers over a guy like Derrick Henry just because the risk is there. But if you're someone who's just continually drafting Derrick Henry, like he hasn't burned you, and so I can't really knock it too much. Also in tier 3, I have Chase Brown. And honestly, Chase Brown and this next guy, Bucky Irving, are both in kind of interesting spots because day 3 running backs typically don't have a ton of job security. Even if you come in as a rookie, play really well, or, Chase Brown was a year 2 guy, but same kind of thing. You come in, you play well. It seems like it would make sense for the team to ride with you, right? You're not on a big contract, didn't have to spend a lot to get you in terms of money or capital. But a lot of times these guys break out and then teams are already looking to replace them. Think about an Elijah Mitchell, a James Robinson. But if we're thinking logically, I feel like it makes a lot of sense for Chase Brown to stay as the Bengals running back 1. Fantasy-wise, we saw him just take off after Zach Moss went down. In 8 games with no Zach Moss, he averaged 20.6 PPR points per game. And I think you just look at this Bengals offseason. They're in a spot where they're going to need to pay Ja'Marr Chase most likely. They're going to want to try to bring T. Higgins back. The defense was awful, right? Are we in a position here where the Bengals are going to go out and either spend real money on a free agent running back or spend legit draft capital on like a replacement running back or like a day 1 or day 2 pick? Like it doesn't seem super likely to me. Even heading into this past year, right? Like they didn't seem overly high on Chase Brown, but they only brought in Zach Moss's competition. Now Chase Brown looks like your running back of the future. I don't think they make a huge swing, but who knows? If they don't, though, I think Chase Brown is in a great spot on this Bengals offense. Then another guy who I referenced, Bucky Irving, just honestly such a fun player, such a fun rookie year, and he just progressively built a larger and larger role throughout the season. In his first 5 games, he averaged 8.3 PPR points per game, saw an uptick in his next 4 at 14.3, and then in his last 7 healthy games, so it was like 8 games, but he had that one game where he like came in hurt, left early with injury. In the last 7 healthy games, he averaged over 20 PPR points per game, and we look at like the final game of the season, the Bucs needed to win. What did they do? They gave Bucky Irving 24 opportunities, and Rachaad White did not get a single touch. He was out there on third downs, he was pass blocking, but Rachaad White did not get a single opportunity. They gave everything to Bucky Irving. I think one big question mark here is what happens with Liam Cohen. He's like a massive favorite to be the Jaguars' next head coach. If I'm the Bucs, I think you strongly consider telling Todd Bowles to beat it, and you bring in Liam Cohen as the head coach. Look at this team. He's done so much for the offense. He has unlocked this run game, which has just been terrible. I mean, pretty much since like the Brady days with the Buccaneers. You cannot let that guy get out of the building. And if he stays, I'd feel better about Bucky Irving. But even if they bring in someone else, like Bucky Irving's legit. He's proven it. He beat out the guy who had the workhorse job in Rachaad White. Bucky Irving, I think, is going to be a monster moving forward. Then also in tier 3, I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs. I'm guessing some people think this is a little bit low. Had a really nice year in his first spot with the Packers, 17.2 points per game. And he did it on like not the largest opportunity share. I was someone who thought Marshawn Lloyd was kind of going to work his way into somewhat of a split. We never really got to see that play out because the dude was just completely unable to stay healthy. But I mean, 17 plus points per game on a sub 70% opportunity share is pretty impressive. He obviously was a touchdown threat, especially in the second half of the season. He was third in red zone touches, fourth in total touchdowns. If he's there with the Packers next year, I think he's going to be a nice like mid-tier RB1 option. Also, didn't have a ton of receiving usage, only 26th in target share, but he was efficient with those opportunities, third in yards per route run, and then also third in yards per reception. So maybe some room to grow there moving forward. Now, tier 4, this is just going to be the Christian McCaffrey tier. And at this point, like, I have no idea what to do with CMC. Obviously, any risk attached to him is just due to his injury concerns, because pretty much from 2018 through 2024, he has been like league winner or bust. 2017 was his rookie year. I think he averaged like 14 points per game. So he was a solid pick, but he wasn't obviously tanking your team, and he wasn't also carrying you to a fantasy championship. But since then, 2018, he has the breakout 24 points per game in a full season, league winner. Next year, 29.3 PPR points per game in a full season, league winner. Then 2020, 2021, that's where he has the injury issues, plays a combined 10 games, pretty much tanking your season in both of those, right? He's a first-round pick, probably the 101 both those years, not coming through. Then we have 2022, he stays healthy. I guess his most like mid-level season where maybe he wasn't a complete league winner, but 21 points per game, running back 2 in points per game, he was a great pick in a full season. Then last year, 2023, 24.5 points per game, running back 1. He's carrying you to that fantasy football championship. What happens this year? He's the 101, only plays in 4 games, and pretty much tanks your team if you drafted him, with your first round pick. So he has 5 seasons where he's played 16 plus games. He now has 3 seasons where he has played under 8. So he's not one of these running backs where he's like banged up throughout the year and maybe he misses a few weeks. He's playing 12, 13, 14 games. It's pretty much been he's locked into a full season or the dude's playing less than half the year. If he's someone where he's just like completely off your draft board, I get it, especially if you're someone who plays in like one league. It's just like your home league with your friends, your work league, whatever it might be. And you don't want to draft someone with this risk who could just completely tank your season. Like, I get it. As someone who's going to be in a lot of leagues, I'm going to be drafting Christian McCaffrey. Like, if I can get his upside in round 2, like, I'm going to have to do that in a few spots. If he burns me in like that league or 2, whatever. But I will be interested in drafting him. I think it's really just going to come down to like your preference and how risk averse you are. And then the final tier here, tier 5, kind of tough to organize these guys. My number 10 is going to be Breece Hall. Definitely coming off a very underwhelming season, was drafted as a top 3 running back. Think I had him as my running back 2 right after CMC. I mean, both those guys just tanked, but was the running back 17 in points per game. He was supposed to kind of be elevated with Aaron Rodgers coming in or, being healthy on a better offense. He was really good last year, especially once he was cleared from the ACL. So you're thinking, all right, he played well on this terrible offense. Great pure runner, has receiving upside. Now you pair him with Aaron Rodgers, he's going to take that leap. It just didn't happen. He actually saw a smaller rushing and receiving role. He did not get the touchdown boost, and his efficiency took a hit. So like across the board, it was somehow worse than the previous season when he was playing with Zach Wilson. He also just saw his efficiency, like he went from the 6th best rushing yards over expected per attempt to league average this past year. I'm just someone where I'm still a believer in his talent. It's just a question of like what this team is going to look like, because it's not like they have a good enough draft pick to go out and get one of the top quarterbacks. Are they going to keep Rodgers? I don't know. The whole situation is just like a dumpster fire, but I'm a believer in the talent. We'll see how the offseason kind of shakes out. Then someone who I didn't expect to be maybe higher on consensus then is going to be Chuba Hubbard. I have him as my running back 11. He's not someone I was super high on heading into this year. I really liked Jonathan Brooks. Obviously, the injury stuff just completely nuked him, but I'm going to be high on Chuba Hubbard coming into 2025. He signed a 4-year extension at pretty much like $8 million a year, which is, legit money for a running back, especially when they had already drafted Jonathan Brooks. So they clearly like Chuba Hubbard. You look at this running back room, if they are extending Chuba Hubbard and then you spend a round 2 pick on Jonathan Brooks, he's likely going to miss the entire 2025 year. But are you going to go out and bring in like another legit running back to compete? I don't think so. Like that would be a lot of capital, a lot of money and draft picks into the running back position when you have Chuba Hubbard sitting there. And then when you look at when Chuba really kind of pulled away in that backfield, it was week 3. From that point on, in 12 games, Chuba Hubbard averaged 17.6 points per game. He had a 78% opportunity share, which was 5th highest in the NFL. He was averaging over 20 opportunities per game. And we know Canales is totally fine using workhorse. Rachaad White was an amazing pick last year because of Dave Canales, was just force feeding him. So I think Chuba Hubbard is going to be super interesting heading into next year. Then after Chuba, going to go with Kyren Williams. I know I said top 12. It's going to be more like top 14, just getting some of these other guys in here. So Kyren Williams, my running back 12, averaged 17 points per game, was the running back 10. The usage really did not, waver. The concern was, would Blake Corum come in, take some usage? He didn't. Kyren Williams was 3rd in opportunity share. He was 1st in red zone touches, 4th in touchdowns. It's pretty much just going to be a question once again, like, is Corum going to eat into that workload? Kyren Williams wasn't super efficient. I think if Corum is somewhat decent, it makes sense to kind of make this a split, but Sean McVay hasn't really shown that he's willing to do that. So if Kyron's going to get workhorse usage on a good offense, he's obviously going to be in the mix for a running back 1 for fantasy. Then my running back 13 is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Ended up finishing the season as the running back 7 in points per game. Kind of misleading because he looked like a complete bust up until the last 3 weeks. Then he just poured it on. So his last 3 games, 39.8, 27.6, and 25 PPR points. There are just real offensive questions here for the Colts. The quarterback situation, is Anthony Richardson going to be the guy? It seems like they're going to head into training camp next year, wanting him to be the quarterback 1. And then the question is just, what is JT's ceiling with Richardson? If he's not hitting right, the overall ceiling of the offense is going to be capped. And not only is it capped, but now you have a mobile quarterback who's going to be vulturing touchdowns near the goal line. So that's why I'm not overly high on JT heading into next year. And then my final guy here is going to be James Cook. Was the running back 11 in points per game. Didn't have the largest workload, a little over 15 opportunities per game, but he really hit in the touchdown department. He scored 18 touchdowns, which is kind of surprising because you do have Josh Allen kind of vulturing. Josh Allen rushed for 12 touchdowns. I still think James Cook is like a solid fringe running back 1. I'm just not quite sure if he has that upside to be like a mid to high end RB1. Like in a season where he is scoring 18 touchdowns and he's still like a back end running back 1, I don't see him being like an 18, 19, 20 opportunity per game guy. So I think running back 14 is fair. High end RB2, with back end RB1 upside, seems like a reasonable spot to have them. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 14. Let me know your thoughts. Who would you have higher or lower? Would love to hear it. Thank you all for stopping by. Check out the wide receivers. I posted that yesterday or 2 days ago, so take a look at that also. But thank you, and I will see you in the next one.